There were more than 650 unsheltered homeless people living in downtown San Diego in 2014. That's according to the Regional Task Force on the Homeless. Now the city says it'll fund a 350-bed permanent shelter run by St. Vincent de Paul's Village. But could a permanent facility result in more people living on the street? Joining me with the details are my guest, Rick Gentry, President and CEO of the San Diego Housing Commission, and Marcos Aguilera, Chairman of the Barrio Logan Association. And Rick, the decision of the City Council to do this permanent shelter is part of a comprehensive plan to deal with homelessness in San Diego. How is the permanent facility, how does it factor into this change of plans?
The permanent facility factors into the change of plans in two ways. Number one was a decision made by the City Council last October to get people out of tents. These are sprung structures that were never designed for human habitation. They've been in place off and on for 29 years. So the council asked the Housing Commission to look for a permanent structure, number one, because people shouldn't be living in tents. They should be living in permanent structures. And secondarily, what we looked for was a 12-month facility rather than just a seasonal facility for San Diego's winter. And what we wind up with is a permanent facility that will house 350 people 12 months out of the year with services rather than a sprung structure, tents, that will house people for 4 months.
Let's talk about the beds. So my understanding is that the 350 beds in the winter shelters will be going away essentially. And the beds at St. Vincent, they're not actually additional beds because they're already in existence. So how is the new plan going to result in more people being having facilities and not being on the street?
Well, there's not a reduction in resources here at all. In fact, it's an expansion. It's a matter of perspective. St. Vincent de Paul has shifted resources from the transitional facility, the Paul Mirabile Center, to something called rapid rehousing, which is part of a housing first approach, permanent supportive housing. So the money being used for these 350 beds will be used to put people in a more permanent structure, a house, a home, if you will, somewhere in San Diego. That frees up these 350 beds to be a replacement for the 350 beds that are in the two tents right now.
That are temporary, not year-round. Marcos, what are your concerns about this new plan for a permanent housing facility?
I'd first like to emphasize that I believe that your 650 in downtown figure is probably low. A lot of the statistics for that don't actually extend to Barrio Logan and exterior areas. The biggest concern is that the numbers for us don't add up. And we don't believe that the city should be getting away from lowering the number of overall beds. I definitely want to get behind the Housing Commission and the Housing First model, how they're approaching this. I applaud them in that effort. However, we do not believe that the numbers, the inventory for permanent supportive housing currently exist to base this theoretical view.
And we'll get back to that in a second, Rick, but I do want to ask you, Marcos, that you're involved with a group of neighborhood councils that have secured a facility in north of downtown, I understand, or you're looking at one there that would house up to 900 homeless people. How would that be financed, and what would you need to do with the city to get that approved?
Well, yesterday before the council meeting, we did meet with the mayor's office, and we started to broach that conversation. As I've told Rick offline, and actually spoke to Deacon Vargas, president of Father Joe's, hey, let's all sit and talk about this, because this is a possible proposal, but it has to be with private monies and public money. So the political will needs to be there.
And Rick, what do you think? Do you think the council should consider an alternative and or another permanent facility for people who are homeless?
There is a need for more resources for homeless services in San Diego. And the Housing Commission would be willing to speak with virtually anybody on any responsible proposal. I'll point out that any proposal that comes along would have to provide the proper services and also be financially sustainable over the long term.
And what is your response to Marcos' concern that this isn't going to be enough beds? There won't be enough inventory in San Diego with this new permanent facility.
It is not a reduction in resources. It is a redeployment of resources to a more permanent use. So it's not a reduction. It may be a reduction in East Village, but a lot of the East Village leadership has asked for a reduction in that particular part of town. So we're redeploying toward a housing first model, which hopefully will get people off the streets for more than just a temporary time period.
And very briefly, we need to end on this. When would we know if a new permanent facility would be filling the gap for these homeless people? When would we know that?
Well, I don't have a good answer for that. It would depend on the proposal and the availability of resources. So it would take a little time to evaluate, and then the resources would need to be there. Right now we're using the resources we have in what we think is the best possible way.
So if the permanent shelter gets built, then what I mean is that, is there a monitoring way to see how it's doing, and how soon could we tell?
Yes. We'll know right away. There's a permanent intake and evaluation process now. People coming in will be a permanent deployment of what their needs are. So we'll be working on that right away.
All right, Rick Gentry and Marcos Aguilera, thank you. There's a lot more on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.